The interesting thing to me as a composer is that the techniques that evolve in electronic music are new. What I did in my first album, 7 Waves, was that I combined my classical background with the language of electronics. You're in a world without limitations. You can sustain a note for days. You can create an instrument that has a range from subsonic all the way to off the scale. You have such freedom. Electronic music gave me control over my own musical expression. The sound, it was just so stunning, so immersive. When I went into that world of electronic music, the acoustic world just didn't seem to work for me anymore. One of my great inspirations musically is actually the ocean. I was inspired by the rhythm of the sea, this slow, inevitable, comforting flow of the sound. The dependability of it, that it would just go on forever. One of my favorite things to do with the Buchla is to actually make the sound of the ocean. The sound is moving in a slow, continuous space. So I can change the sound because it's alive, it's not a sample. And so I can interact with it and bring in different, keep it alive. So the thing about a sample sometimes is that it gets static. And the thing about this live interactive system is that it is alive. And I can shift it and change it and interact with it. My setup includes 2 Eventide H9s. These have been modified so that they fit into the Buchla panel and use the Buchla power supply. And also, very important, I've added a control voltage so that I can control the amount of effect dynamically. These iPads are my Bluetooth controllers for the H9s. And so right now, for my ocean, I use a long delay. And I'm going to bring in some little birds. This is an iPad with an anemogue, and I use this for just a couple of little sounds. And one of them is what I'm going to show you now, which is the birds. Okay, so here's the waves. And now we can add little birds. So what I'm doing there is I'm using a nice delay. The bird sounds reflect. They start one place and then you hear them echoing in the distance. And that type of control of the spatial dynamic can be subtle and very evocative and immersive, because what happens with the quad is that you're really enveloped in a 3-dimensional illusional space. Quadraphonic is the natural domain of electronic music because the sound is essentially monophonic. And it comes to life when it's moving. It's not about the sound per se or the timbre. It's about the way it moves. So movement is an essential part of the life and musicality of the sound. The next thing I want to show you is a melodic pattern that I use as part of an intro to the build-up of the material. So the thing that's important in this is the control that I get with the 248, the multiple arbitrary function generator. What I'm going to show you is the use of randomness. So the sequence that I'm playing is just a 2-note sequence. And if there were not another level of interest, it would be boring very quickly. So what I do is I allow a pulse that's in time with the sequence to drive the input of the 248 so that it is strobing. You'll see the light jumping left to right and randomly arriving at some of the stages where I've made a high voltage, and that voltage is telling the wave shape to go from a sine wave to a sawtooth wave. You know, the beauty of this instrument is that it generates the space as it's generating the music. So if you're trying to add spatial interest in a post-production sense, it's very hard to integrate the motion with the rhythm. But this machine has always been a quad machine and always has had control of the movement of the space. The output of this row, it's patched into the wave shape. So I'm just going to put up at random, say 3 of these. When the random movement lands on one of those places, you're going to hear a change. Here it is without it. Okay, this is the 2-stage sequence. Not very interesting, just goes on and on. But now I'm going to add an unpredictable element. And then the other thing I can do is change the bass. We don't get a lot of bass in here, but... And see how the sound is moving? Now, the other thing that I can do, let me switch this patch. So now, if you look at this, this is Bluetooth to this, and I have a control voltage going in here that's affecting the amount of the direct signal to the process signal, and so it increases the sense of space. And again, it's random. See, it's jumping randomly. And that's for a reason, because it's more, it kind of has more energy when it's random like that. That spatial control was done with a random voltage, and I like that because it's a little unsettling after the calm waves. In the old days, I played a 50-panel unit system. So it took, it was a tower, but I wasn't running around the world, in a suitcase. So this is a much more compact system. The Coca-Cola sound really was a breakthrough for me. I thought, let me come up with a sound that doesn't have a key center. And the idea of the bubbles came to me because they're musical, but they're not pitch-centered. It's very easy to make in the sense you just take a subsonic sound and you pull off the harmonics. So then I made the fizz, and that was just frequency modulating white noise. The Buchla is so adaptive to sound design. Part of my performance, I'm introducing the raw materials, which are these 4 16-stage sequences. It comes in the bass. Okay, this is A. And now I'm going to put a sustain on it so you can hear the sequence. Now I'm going to go to B. B sustained. Then to C. C sustained. D. Now I can bring in the random element. Some bass. And a melody. This random wave shape modulation, I'm going to take it out. So now we have just a sine wave. Because it's not jumping, I'm going to put it on the first sequence. And now I'm going to put it up an octave. Whoops. And now I'm going to bring in a second oscillator. And now I'm going to put another random modulation. First, I'm going to bring in two sequences at the same time. So now I have A and B. They're all designed to work together. And I'm going to now do random octave transpositions of one of them. So I'm just adding in. Same two sequences. Now I'm going to change the envelope of this one. The randomness in this case is octave transpositions. And so when you add octave transpositions, it brings out a second tier of melody. You're only listening to two voices, but it sounds like a lot more because you're hearing one melody up here, another one here, and another one down here. So it's a form of counterpoint. These are techniques, what I'm showing you, that are designed for this instrument. There are techniques for the piano, arpeggios and chords, and techniques for the violin and pizzicato and different things. And we have techniques for this instrument. And some of these are the ones that I discovered in the 70s and still using.
Brighten up. Come where flavors are rainbow.
Skittles.
was to make an album. And in those days, you had to have a record deal, or you couldn't do anything because everything was LPs, there were no CDs, you had to have a big studio, and there were no home studios yet, there were no computers, and so I realized, because none of the major labels was interested in this, they just didn't get it. They thought I should sing. They thought I should play the guitar. So I realized I'd have to do it independently, and so I needed money because, technology back then was hugely expensive. 50 megabytes of memory in the synclavier was $50,000. I mean, this is absurd today. So we were in a different magnitude of expense back then. And so I really had to dedicate myself just to making money. That money allowed me to record my first album, 7 Waves. The concept of a keyboard in this analog musical modular system is very different from what we're used to. First of all, you'll notice that it's not mechanical. When you hit a key, it doesn't go down. It's really a command center. I have this programmed to stop, start. I have it set to transpose. That's all decided by me. There's no there. So you have this palette, and then you have an interface module, and you tell it, you say, I want this to be this pitch, and so forth, and you program it, and you tell it which keys you want to function. These instruments can actually play themselves. You can design a patch that feeds back on itself and goes on forever. And I have such a patch that I use. I call it the jungle patch. And basically what I do is I put a slope on all of the stages that are here, and I change the control. So now I'm going to drive the sequencer with the mark tempo. I can bring in this bass. So these are random. Is that fun? And this can go just on because it's a random patch. So things are changing. The envelope is always changing because there's a random voltage going into the duration of the envelope, which is cycling. So it goes dee, 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 or dee, 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 dee. So it changes the sound, and it's just. And then the elephant comes in, and the wind circles. So you're creating an environment, a spatial imaginary spatial environment. And you could just, be in this for a long time. Now we're in a renaissance. The kids all have Eurorack systems and analog is back. For me, this is a dream because 40 years ago when I played the instrument, nobody understood it. I couldn't launch it. The theaters wouldn't put in quadraphonic sound systems. I couldn't record. Everything was kind of blocked. The kids have analog systems, and I want to show them how we played, back then. Non-keyboard, no traditional keyboard. The joy of just interacting with the machine. The problem that I see is that a lot of the machines don't have the level of feedback that you need for live performance. My special interest in the little world that I live in is the interactive live performance with analog modular. It's exciting, it's engaging, it's in the moment, it's risky. There's nothing pre-recorded. I project an image of the machine so that people can actually understand what's going on. There's so much tech performance now where the audience doesn't know what's happening. And very often not much is happening. Somebody is hitting go on a pre-recorded recording. It's too mysterious. So I want people to see how it's done.